This happened a couple of years ago. It's time to get it off my chest. I was around 18, and for a period of time, I was very physically active. I have struggled with some bad habits brought through excessive partying, but exercise proved to be very helpful in this regard. I regularly went jogging. Now mind you, at the time I lived in a small town in the ever so peaceful Scandinavia, all out by myself jogging in the woods, not a soul in sight, so my class at the time didn't start until around noon, so I went out for a morning jog. Broad daylight and everything, I went on my bike to the tracks, left my bike at the tracks at the jogging station. Don't know what else to call it, but some of you will know what I mean. Now as I'm about to enter the tracks, there's two middle-aged men, they're just sitting by the cottage. I glance at them, only to find myself looking in the eyes of one of them. The way that he looked at me was deeply unsettling. It was only for a moment, but I'll never forget how I felt with them piercing eyes on me. My gut is making an honest effort trying to tell me that something is very off about the situation. These men are wearing jeans and leather jackets. They sure aren't here for the sake of exercise. But I brush it off. I think I'm overreacting. Turns out though that I was wrong. I had only been jogging for a couple of minutes when I suddenly felt like turning around. And there they are, in a white minivan, following me on the tracks. I felt that man's devilish eye on me again. Oh God, I thought to myself. I'm doing my best to try and think of a logical, non-threatening reason for them to be following me. Can't think of one that makes sense though, so I'm trying to work out what on earth I'm gonna do. I don't want to make it obvious that I'm terrified. If I start running fast, I'm gonna be prey. I mean literally nobody else is here. Fortunately, I've been on these tracks a number of times before, so I know that there's gonna be a sharp curve not too far away. So I try and act as if I'm not least bothered by the whole situation. As soon as I pass the curve, I'm out of their vision for a short while. I sprint into the woods as if my life depends on it, and hide behind a small rock. As I'm crouching down, I see a white vehicle pass a sharp curve. Soon, they're out of my sight, but I don't dare move. I know that once I've passed the curve, they'll know that I'm nowhere in sight. They'll know that I've ran off somewhere. After the curve, the trail is in a straight line for quite some time. They'll know that I'm not on the tracks anymore, so I stayed put, thinking that if they're coming after me, they will come back. If I'm overreacting, they'll carry on doing whatever they're doing, and I won't be seen again. But the white van did come back. At this point, I don't even want to breathe, because I don't want to give my position away. I can't fully remember if the van stopped and the dominant man went outside, or if they simply passed the curve again very slowly in the search for me. But I vividly remember when the little van went back where it come from, I was somewhat relieved, though still worried. Thing is, all tracks lead behind the cottage where these men were likely to be. I then decided to carry on deeper into the woods, glancing over my shoulder every now and then to make sure that nobody's there. My sense of direction is somewhat okay when I'm in the forest for some reason. I'm useless otherwise. Anyway, I know that there will be a highway if I keep going. I'm reaching the highway and finally make it back there and can go home. It usually takes me half an hour walking from the tracks to get home. This journey took 3 or 4 hours but was totally worth it. I can't remember if I ever went to pick up my bike or not. I just know that these men had bad intentions. This happened around 2007, when I was about 19. I had just graduated high school, but not yet got to my own place. My friend Zach and his brother Chris had their own apartment, so naturally, I went there all the time. One such night, at around 2 or 3 AM, we decided we needed snacks, so decided to walk to a nearby gas station, cutting through a small wooded area to get there. Cutting through the woods again on our way back to the apartment, I noticed a man walking in the opposite direction. He was of average height, but fairly stocky and strong looking. He was wearing a black zip-up hoodie with the hoodie over his head. He was wearing a hat too, and a long red beard. He only appeared to be a few years older than us. He was staring intently at me as he walked past. "Geez, what's this guy's problem?" I said to Chris. "What guy?" he responded. I turned around to point him out and noticed that he has moved to our left side, where he was on our right side the first time. Also, he's now facing our direction. I mentioned something about this to Chris and Zach, and we pick up the pace. I turn around again to see if he's still there. This time, he's peeking out from behind a tree watching us. Crap, I think he's following us. I say to them, "Now if a guy follows you into the woods at night, it's not a good thing." I turn around again. He's jogging towards us and shouting. He calls out, "Hey, what are you doing here?" We tell him that we're just coming from the gas station. He responds with something along the lines of us being liars and that we're up to no good. At this point, he walks next to us. Chris tells him what we're doing and that we don't want any trouble. We're not doing anything stupid. Chris then says that we don't do anything but drink Coke and play video games. "Oh, so you do Coke," he says. We come out from the woods and are in sight of the apartment, but this is where it went from creepy to terrifying. He jumps in front of us, blocking our path. He then calls us liars again and looks past us and says, "Isn't that right, guys?" I turn around and see two more men walking quickly towards us. I have no idea where they come from. We're so focused on the beard guy that we didn't even see or hear anybody else come in. Another voice calls out. There's two more guys next to the beard guy. Beard guy points me out and says that I've robbed his apartment. The five of them form a semicircle around the three of us. I denied robbery, but the beard guy, who I've never seen before, says that he would recognize me anywhere. The beard guy says, "I'm getting my money back," and pulls out something from his pocket. We run. One of the guys tries to grab me, but misses. We then run towards the corner where the apartment is and decide that it's not a good idea to go there because we don't want them to know where my friend lives. We run for a while longer until we thought we lost them. Then we go back to the apartment. Zach calls the cops, but they never come. I think it's because he told him that mysterious people appeared from the trees, which isn't the best description, because it definitely doesn't put across the seriousness of the situation. But we didn't see them again after this, but we were shaken up for a while, and we don't know what would have happened had we stayed. So my family owns a cabin on a lake up in New Hampshire. We go there every summer. It's basically our home away from home. There's other homes up on the lake, quite a few near us, but beyond that, it's a rural area. There's miles of woods stretching beyond the lake and houses, so there's really no reason to be in the area unless you were hunting, own a lake, or were visiting the lake for whatever reason. So one night, maybe 6 years ago, so it was late at night, my girlfriend and I were laying in bed chatting to each other when all of a sudden, we hear footsteps outside of the open window. The window lays open only about halfway up on the wall on the other side of the bed, and is situated so that it opens right at the bottom of the bed where our feet are. The ground around my home is covered in layers of pine needles that drop from above. It's very hard to walk upon quietly, but the footsteps sounded like whatever was making them was trying their best not to be heard. They sounded relatively close, but we rationalized to ourselves that they probably were being made from some kind of animal. A few minutes go by and we hear them again, except this time they seem closer. They seem to be right outside of the window, still trying to move quiet. At this point, the two of us are starting to get freaked out. To our horror, we then look down and see a hand slowly coming through the window. Of course, we scream and wake up the home. My parents come running out to their adjacent room. We tell them what happened. My father rationalizes that it was a figure of our imagination, but it's very obvious that it wasn't. Both of us saw the same thing at the same time. I'm still not sure what happened to this day. When I was in grad school, my family lived in a home that sat directly across the school I attended. However, there was about half a mile of wooded area between them. I was allowed to walk to and from school because how straightforward it was. My mum informed me that she and her siblings walked through that woods to school when they were younger, so she felt like it is the right thing to do to allow us to do the same. I loved the excitement of being able to walk to school on my own, and I felt pretty safe at home in the woods. This is because I've been raised around them. Now the walk was direct, with very little issue, aside from a small but wide creek that I had to cross. The creek itself was no problem, it was more the problem that there was a steep bank that had to be scaled. It wasn't too terrible unless it had been raining. Now it had rained one day before, so my steps, which were normally loud, were fairly silent. Now this might have saved my life, or at least saved me from something terrible. When I reached the creek, I was in my own little world. I was thinking about a science project we had to do at school and whether or not I was fully prepared for it. I was doing the supernova section, and I wasn't feeling very ready to make a speech in front of everybody about it. Anyway, I reached the creek and dropped down the first bank with a slight wet thud. I crossed over the water and began looking for something to grab a hold of to pull myself up. There were usually roots sticking out to use. Before I climbed up to the other side, I heard a noise, like people talking. I stopped and waited to see if I could hear it again. I did. I heard a couple of boys talking, getting closer to me. I then quickly smashed myself up against a bank to listen to what they were saying for a minute. I don't know why, but something just told me to stay away, that something was wrong. The boys come so close, all the way to the edge of the creek bank, but they didn't jump down. If they had, they would have seen me in a flash. As luck would have it, there was an overhang that I was able to hide under. I then listened as the boys talked. Yeah, she comes here all the time. She'd be coming any minute. My heart sank. I was the only person that walked this trail from school, and they were directly in my path. That isn't to say that nobody else has ever walked in the woods, but in all the time that I've used this trail, I've never seen another person use the trail before. Now to get to the woods from my home, I had to cross the road and walk through a small flat area that has no trees. And from the other side, I had to walk through the school's football field. Anybody from there could have seen me. So I stood there plastered against my wall, waiting for them to catch me. But they walked around a little bit, smoked some cigarettes, and getting frustrated said, "Where the hell is she? I thought she'd come here all the time. Maybe she isn't coming to school today. Anyway, we gotta go now." The high schoolers then caught their bus to high school at the elementary school. I heard them moving, and I didn't dare make a move. I waited a good 30 minutes or so before I darted out of the creek bed and towards home. I will never know exactly what them two boys have planned to do with me. I'm sure I don't want to know though. Just a little background information. I'm a 26-year-old female, kind of a tomboy. I grew up climbing trees, playing in the dirt. I've never touched a Barbie doll in my life. So back in the summer of 2002, I was 16 at the time. My boyfriend asked me on a camping trip with him and his parents. Me being the tomboy that I was, I graciously accepted. His parents were planning on a weekend of us going out rafting, boating, swimming, the works. I was in paradise. Now they had an RV, it was fully furnished, and I slept in the kitchen and living room area. So as a side note, we're out in the middle of the woods, a designated camping area. It was so quiet and peaceful. You could hear the river in the stillness of the night. It was soothing. I remembered thinking to myself, I could live here forever. The next day was probably the funnest day of my life. We went out kayaking, swam, and then my boyfriend's dad had a cookout. I can't remember the last time that I laughed so much and enjoyed myself so much. It seemed like the day flew by, but before I knew it, it was time for us to go to bed. We had a big day planned for the next day, and I was eager to get enough sleep so I could wake up and do it all over again. I remembered lying awake though, just staring at the ceiling. My boyfriend was snoring, and I laughed as quietly as I could. He snored very loud. This was the one last laugh that I got before my life was literally changed forever. There was a tap on the side of the RV. It caught me off guard. I wasn't even alarmed. I just thought it as a random noise. You know the ones. A creak here and there. Just unsettling. Bottom line is, I wasn't scared or freaked out by it too much. I tried to sleep, but I heard another tap, then an unmistakable giggle. I thought maybe my boyfriend's parents were awake and messing around with us. Silence washed over the place again. I hear the river, the ringing in my ears that you get when it's dead silent. I had this sinking feeling in my stomach. I hear people say they get it when something bad's about to happen. I felt it at that moment. In the dead silence, I hear the giggle again, followed by a scraping sound coming from outside of the RV. My heart jumped into my throat and I felt tears in my eyes. Somebody's outside the RV, but I was literally scared stiff. I could not move a muscle, and the scraping sound continued. I whispered for my boyfriend, but he kept on snoring. I was lying about 5 feet away from the main door. More silence. My heart is beating so fast that I'm afraid I'm going to have a heart attack. I tap my chest trying to calm myself. As I'm watching the square hole in the door, I see a small hand just appear out of the darkness. I almost shriek out in fear. The hand was of a girl, no doubt. I could see those fake pressed ones that you get from Walmart. But that still didn't stop me from freaking out. I sit up and start screaming. I mean really start wailing. My boyfriend's parents stagger into the room. All I can do is point at the door. My boyfriend's dad goes to open the door, but there's a sudden crash. He then falls back inside, falling onto the couch, out cold. A rock falls onto the floor. That's when my boyfriend wakes up and starts shouting. The mum is going insane, tending to her husband. I'm screaming, still in shock. When I stop screaming, I hear hysterical laughter from outside, followed by footsteps on top of the RV. We're on the roof. We're on the roof. I hear in a high-pitched, nasally voice from outside the RV. None of us have cell phones. It's 2002. And we were just now starting to get into the cell phone craze. So we're truly magically out in the middle of nowhere with no way to get help. The RV is rocking with somebody jumping up and down. Then there's a crash and the side door frame smashes in. The girl outside is screaming and laughing. She mocks me. The dad manages to sober up and grab a gun from one of the cupboards. He opens the door and fires out into the darkness. The pacing on the roof immediately stops. The shrieking girl outside suddenly stops too. Everything goes silent. I turn to look at my boyfriend. There's a window behind him. I see a face, a hood drawn over his face. I know it's a man because I can make the outline of a beard on him. That was all I could see. The man then raises a gloved hand and starts waving at me. I pull my boyfriend away from the window and start screaming. The dad runs inside asking what's wrong. I look back at the window. The man is gone. We drove out to the campsite that night with a broken window. My boyfriend's dad went to hospital with a minor concussion where the rock hit him. The parents called the police the next morning and the officers went out and searched the area. They couldn't find anything. No other reports were even filed after. I had to go through counselling and therapy because I had trouble sleeping for about 2 years after it. My boyfriend and I actually broke up due to the stress and trauma I was going through because of it actually. Eventually, I started to get better then. While I was in university, some girlfriend and I decided to go to the movies. There was one out called The Strangers. I decided to go back because I had no homework. Turns out, it was scarily like the experience I had though. I actually had a panic attack because of this and had to go hospital. A few months after that, I read a newspaper article where a woman was arrested at a campsite not too far away from where my boyfriend's parents' RV was vandalised, and they were arrested for vandalising some tents and RVs. I don't know if it is the same girl though. They didn't show her face or picture, but it did make me wonder. As of 2012, I no longer go to therapy or have nightmares, but I do own several types of guns. If you knock on my door in the middle of the night, you better have an explanation as to why you're doing so.
At the end of May 1999, I was headed into my freshman year of high school. That summer, me and a group of 6 girls from my church went on a mission trip up to the coast from Riverside, CA to Mount St. Helens, Washington. 3 of the girls' mothers acted as our drivers and chaperones. We basically all piled into an old Chevy van and a station wagon, headed up PCH, and had the trip of a lifetime. I got baptized at a historic mission in St. Louis, Ospido. We spent 3 days in San Francisco, saw the Capitol, Portland, Oregon, Yosemite. Basically, we got to see every worthy landmark and stay in every noteworthy town from SoCal to the Canadian border. When we stayed in Yosemite National Park, we spent 3 nights at the Cheddar Lodge. While in Yosemite and sightseeing, the old Chevy van died in the middle of nowhere. Luckily, even though we were unable to get a cell signal within an hour, someone stopped and helped us. This was so long ago I don't remember all the details, but basically the owner of the van told us later that the mechanic told her that someone tampered with the engine. She was very upset by this and said it was something that had been done intentionally. The van had to be abandoned and we had to use a rental the rest of the way. I don't know if it's a coincidence, but it turns out Carrie Anthony Stainer, aka the Yosemite Killer, was the maintenance man for the Cheddar Lodge during this time. He had murdered and decapitated a park ranger by the time we were guests at the lodge. The very next month, he gained access to a room where a woman and her young daughter and her daughter's young friend were staying under the guise of checking the room for something. Basically, he knocked on the door in the middle of the night, and because he worked at the lodge, they opened the door. He abducted them, then did horrible things to them, murdered them and decapitated them. I can't say that I remember seeing him, but we probably did, as we were there for 3 nights. It's just one of those things I look back on and think he could have easily knocked on one of our doors, as it was just a few weeks before, and decided he wanted to abduct us and kill us. I feel incredibly lucky I dodged that bullet. If the time frame wasn't so close, it wouldn't creep me out as much, but it continues to haunt me 16 years later. Big fan of the subreddit for Lurkery. This happened to me a few years ago, and I don't often talk about it, since it's weird and gory, and not the kind of story you whip out at cocktail parties, but here it goes. A couple of years ago, I was stressed out from college and big city life, and decided to spend a long weekend in the woods doing what my city friends consider utter lunacy, and us outdoorsy people consider nirvana. Deep woods free camping, in the winter alone. While that sounds like the beginning of a missing persons report, if you're an experienced outdoorsman, it's pretty safe. I also take a secret pleasure in being the white trash warrior-ess my dad always hoped I'd be. I always hated the feeling of claustrophobia that came with being a female in the city, avoiding eye contact, not walking alone at night. When you're a girl out in the woods, you're in charge. You're safe within the warm embrace of your own solitary freedom, or so I thought. I spent a few hours on the roads, the surroundings getting wilder and wilder as I drove. I parked in an allowed roadside ditch, with a compass and a map, hiked until I was in a mile's reach of some good ice fishing. I was at least 4 miles from the road. I made an extremely discreet camp in a clearing, with just one little hole in the snow for my tiny tent and my tiny campfire. After a couple of beautiful days of just hiking and relaxing around camp, I made the trek to the fishing hole. Everything was in utter winter stillness. The air was crisp, and the only signs that I wasn't in a perfect vacuum were the twitterings of birds and very different rumblings of half-frozen waterfalls. After a mile or so of crunching along in the snow, I silently celebrated my compass skills when I came out at the exact place I'd intended to. I punched a hole in the thinnest crust of ice and started to fish. My first catch came so quickly. After a few weeks under a frozen surface, the fish are hungry. I was feeling oddly fatigued and jumpy, so I decided to just clean the fish here and now, and take it straight back to camp to cook. I quickly realised my fish preparation skills were rusty at best. I cursed my lack of preparation as I cut myself for the second time. Something in my peripheral senses was irritating me, but I was very set at my task, focusing on the motions in the slippery mess. The thing in periphery was growing more irritating, like the buzzing of a fly or the yammering of a sibling. I carved and hacked and sliced my hand open freshly as a fish slipped out of my hands and into the snow. Frustrated, I shouted, "F off with that whistling, will you?" Silence resumed, and then my heart stopped. Living in a college neighbourhood, I had grown accustomed to white noise that I had failed to recognise how grossly inappropriate this sound was in context. The silence weighed down on me as I broke into a sweat. The only reason a human would be this deep into the woods would be to hunt, and no hunter would give himself away like that. And if he was whistling for any other reason, shouldn't he have reacted to my outburst, yelled something vulgar back, apologised? No, nothing. Just total silence in the woods. Silence as pure as it was before I spoke. Unsure if I'd misheard the tweetings of a bird or something, I decided the fish was a lost cause, slung my gear over my shoulder and headed for camp. I trudged off in the woods, and about a quarter of a mile from camp, I saw a large mass protruding from the snow. Apprehensive but drawn, like a moth to a flame, I trudged up to what materialised in the closing distance as a moose kill. A really good moose kill. A clean shot through the upturned eye, staring at me and saying something that was imposing a sense of dread on me, but a dread I couldn't translate. I ran hard and fast, in the snow in the woods. Everything looked the same. I knew I was moving south, and I knew I'd passed camp on the east. I made for the road, eventually slowing down to a weary trudge, calming at the comforting sight of the woods clearing ahead to make way for the country roadway. I looked to my left and saw my car 50 yards or so down, jogged to it, and drove the lonely 15 miles to the first motel. I had none of my belongings, and no earthly idea of why I'd just abandoned my ship like that. It was only as I was sitting up watching infomercials at night that it started to fall together. Why would the Park Service issue free camp passes for the same stretch of woods that allowed hunting? The moose defied everything of my rudimentary understanding of hunting, even the snow to call it. Decomp starts quickly on an animal that size. You'd have time for a few quick pictures, but then you want to have it dressed quickly. Why would you want to kill a moose 5 miles into the forest? How could you ever drag it back to the road? In the morning, in a sleep-deprived and paranoid state, I described everything I'd seen and thought I'd heard to a very confused park ranger. He seemed more vexed about illegal hunting than any of my other crazy city girl ramblings. He said he wanted to come and pick me up and had me take him to where I thought the kill site was. I said I was only going if he brought a gun. He sighed and told me when to meet him. We rode into the woods on an ATV, with me awkwardly riding on the back, as if I was on the back of the wall as awkward as motorcycle. We got to a large impression in the snow where the moose had been. Blood was everywhere. There was also the distinct track of the carcass being dragged. The drag made a smooth trail in the snow, as if the carcass were on a tarp. The ranger said he should take me back now. He asked where my camp was. I pointed in the direction of the drag marks. It looked like he was finally sharing my unease. Back to the hotel, I washed my clothes in the sink and prepared my drive home in the morning. An unknown number called my phone. It was the park ranger. The moose had been dragged into my campsite. He described the scene as a huge mess. He wasn't sure if an animal would help make the mess, but one thing was clear. Someone had cut into my tent with a knife. I asked about the rest of my belongings. He said darkly, "You don't want them back. They're covered in moose mess." "So, what happens now?" I said. "Well, miss, you're gonna have to keep an eye out for this guy. I haven't heard or seen anything like this before. I'm really sorry this happened." And that was it. No closure, no explanation. In the years that have passed, I've tried different applications of reasons. A hunter who needed help, but knew I was already gone. A deranged psychopath looking for his second kill. One of the few friends I shared the story with envisioned him as some deep woods Sweeney Todd. He dubbed him Moosey Todd. I still don't know why I didn't hear the gunshot. The whistling seemed so vivid in my memory, but was it even real? One question has definitely been answered. I'll never go back into the woods alone again.